What initially sparked your interest in retail architecture and community spaces in particular?
I'm probably a lot like most architects in that we have this kind of mythical dream of the fountainhead and, want to go out there and change the world and kind of inflict our thesis on the rest of society, our abstract art thesis. But I didn't know enough about the world. I oftentimes tell, young designers that we're all kind of visually and culturally illiterate for a while until we really get out there and build projects and see what happens. But in college, I had a thesis that I was working on. I was more fixated on the idea of how behavior works in spaces, and all my peers and professors were so obsessed with style. It was all about the style wars, organicism versus parametricism versus postmodernism. It just would go on, and as you all know, talkitecture. And I was like, well, we really don't. We need to understand the behavior. Why are we so fixated on style? And I remember one of my professors said, maybe you should go into sociology. And I was like, well, maybe architecture should be more sociological and anthropological and psychological. And maybe we should do a better job of meeting people where they're at instead of always trying to take them to glass houses. And I live in a glass house, but I don't make other people live in a glass house, not even my family. And so it's a long answer, but I needed a way to prove this thesis that environment affects behavior. That's what I really wanted to understand. And I tried doing it again in college on my own without a way to measure it. And then once I started working at a mall design firm, it was cooking in my head. In 1992, I started my own firm with my business partner, and that was where I could measure through the cash register and through velocity of sales and through basket sizes and even specific things like dwell times, how long somebody dwells and looks at a product. So I started measuring those things merely for the sake of giving me a metric. But then my mind opened up to the kind of wonderful things that happen in retail. Retail oftentimes gets a bad rap as shallow and materialistic, but so much of our lives is about meeting at the intersection of commerce and community. And we're all exchange. When we use money or price or cash registers, it throws people off. But we're all exchanging all day long. We're exchanging ideas and conversations and knowledge and information. And buying a product is one form of exchange, but a whole lot of other exchanges happen at the market. I'd say I call it the market, but at all markets. So
Yeah,
that's a very long answer.
a great
Once
answer.
I once I got into that, I realized I was in a very new niche that nobody was really doing in terms of merging kind of design and social science and a lot of other fields in business to kind of build a new practice.
Do you remember what one of those first successes was and what contributed to that success?
Yeah, I had been testing it all along while I was at other firms and as I mentioned in a mall design firm and other places, but where it really hit for me was when we first started our firm. And like everybody, we had no money. Everybody that's starting out, we had no money, no tables, no. I mean, it was ridiculous. If I invited a client over, they had to step over extension cords because we couldn't even afford long enough extension cords. But we got an opportunity to design a restaurant. I mean, a low budget wing and a prayer restaurant. And we applied all our best ideas to this, all the thinking, and we had developed elaborate principles, even to this day, that are outlined in the book that is coming out. But we were able to apply that into restaurants. And that restaurant became one of the top 10 restaurants in the United States at the time. It was called South End Brewery and Smokehouse. It was in Charlotte, North Carolina. It got so much press, it was unbelievable. And it was based on really using our techniques. And that has a lot to do with if you talk to people about restaurants, we'll use that category specifically. And people always say, well, everybody gives you their opinion on restaurants with, like my father with absolute. The only thing that matters is service and quality of food, but that's all subjective. Some of us like to be bothered by the waiter and constantly filling our teas, and some of us, want to say, stop interrupting our conversation. Um, and so I wanted to verify what people notice and try to understand what they notice. And so we were doing all kinds of, first we tried specific surveys, which don't pull the results we need out. And what I mean by that is statistical surveys. But we started doing observational surveys and bringing all kind of different disciplinary thinkers and really understanding body language, where the eyes move, what they gravitate to, and then casually, informally, and kind of secretively interviewing people to go without them knowing, what do you remember about the place? And I was shocked. All the things we thought patrons would remember about our great designs, so there's not what they remember. They remember tablecloths. They remember maybe the chairs. They remember if we put lighting in the bathroom or not. Then I started noticing gender differences, and that really surprised me because we were trying to be with it and culturally aware, but women would remember certain things and men would remember other things. Wow, that's fascinating.
Like what?
Women notice primarily, or I should say more of a majority, they notice if the bathrooms are nice. And they notice if there's lighting. They definitely notice if there's flowers. They notice the quality of lighting. They notice smells in the bathrooms. Men live more like in a frat house, and the restaurant industry is still heavily male, and they don't care about bathrooms. And so it's a big challenge for us to get them to design better bathrooms because they're not thinking about it. It's not important to them. And so we would really have to work, we'd have to show them statistically and through observational research and interviews why having better bathrooms are so important. And what we would notice is that women oftentimes define the quality of the restaurant by the quality of the bathrooms. So there was a real direct linkage there. And now I'm picking one of many points, but men tend to notice big, giant, sweeping gestures. They have more of a conqueror mentality, and they're not always thinking about nurturance and doing those things, which again has the great potential to sound sexist, but throughout my career, just over and over and over, this is we see these observations. If you allow me, I'll extend that to a different industry, and that is in grocery. Because even I question, is there a difference? I'm a product of my mother, and I'm a big defender of my mother and her life, and so I want that is very important to me. And so I question it sometimes. But when we videotape customers shopping in grocery stores, we see the most fascinating thing happen, and that is when parents shop with their kids, particularly again mothers, which is about 80% of grocery shopping, is still 80% to 90% in some markets female driven, which is unfortunate, but just a reality. The mothers, if they are with their daughters, they will have their daughters participate in shopping. So they'll actually send their daughters out on tasks, very young daughters too, and they'll have a list and they'll say, I need baking soda. And then the daughter will say, where's baking soda? And it's like down aisle 4 to the right. This is what I need. And it's fascinating to watch the cooperation when mothers shop with boys. Boys want to wheelie the cart. They want to pull things out of the shelf rack. They will not, the whole time the mother's like, stop, focus, and it's this constant kind of maintenance of them, and they won't let them shop with them as much, which is fascinating to us. Kind of breaks our heart at times, but we
So
see this on and on.
how would that affect your design of the space? If they're sending the kids out on certain errands, does that affect like where you would tell us where to put stuff on the shelf?
Maybe that one not as much. It tells us a lot about how people are viewing their venues. I should have added to this. Generally, when women shop in grocery stores, they move a lot slower. So they go slow and they make a lot of eye movement, and they check things out and they pick product off the shelf and look at it. They'll look at the back of the product and read the description and ingredient mix. And if there's something new in the aisle, they'll actually tend to look at that and study it. We call it the what the heck purchase. And oftentimes they'll be like, you can see them, like their body language just communicates, I'll give it a try. It's fascinating. We're like, wow, there it is. And they'll try it, not all the time, but it tells us if we bump something out in the eye, it'll help us. And generally we have cameras in the carts. We've asked them, can we videotape you while you shop? When we put cameras in the cart for men, they go so fast that the cameras almost shake out of the cart, and you can see their gait. Sometimes we'll see their feet in front of the cart, almost through the cart, because they're walking so fast. And then we'll interview them after and find out that they've missed half the items on their list because we see your list. And so these are, again, broad sweeping generalizations, to be very clear. And so eye movement is very important to us because we're very interested. Well, how do we slow that man down, and how do we make that experience for the female shopper better? Most of the time, though, I'll be clear, we're not dissecting between women and men. We're just trying to get a sense of the space. Never are we trying to manipulate customers into buying more. We're trying to help them enjoy what many consider a chore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm sorry I got way off on the on
It's
this
great. I love it.
gender
I love the
gender
shocker.
different gender differences. And we videotape less and less. In the early days, we did a lot of videotaping in the 90s because we wanted to try to understand. We don't need it as much anymore. Most of our research, because we've been doing it 31 years, we can go out in the field and watch people shop, buy, convene, gather, eat,
Sure.
and
And people are
understand.
people. I'm sure the human behavior, the psychology of it hasn't really changed that much.
Very
Although I'm curious
universal.
about, very universal. I'm curious about one element though. So obviously we came out of the pandemic and that's altered consumers' relationship to retail spaces in an interesting way. But I feel like there was some writing on the wall long before that, since e-commerce is so dominant right now. So how have you navigated kind of the blurring of lines between online and offline retail experiences?
Yeah, I mean, again, a very broad way to look at it is for thousands of years, our patterns of behavior were pretty much we had to leave the house to get things done. And we had to go out to a place, a market, again, any type of market, whether that's a farmer's market, a grocery store, a hardware store, sporting goods store. I'm using the word market broadly, but we had to go out, which meant we had to dress differently. We had to comb our hair, brush our teeth. We had to park. We had to navigate other human beings and socially cooperate in lines. These are all things that we had to do. And there's kind of this presentation of the everyday self that we had to have out when we were in public. But nothing has more fundamentally changed our universe, which all started around 2007 with the iPhone, apps, social media, Postmates, Spotify, all of these things, which I call the replacement economy, started coming in and replacing things that we used to do. So now you can listen to classical music on Spotify and you don't have to go to the orchestra. You can watch Netflix and not go to the cinema. You don't have to go to a restaurant anymore. You can have all your food delivered. You don't need to go to the mall. And we know these things, but what we don't know is how bit by bit it has fundamentally changed those entities that provide physical places. Because if everybody cuts back 10%, and it's much higher than that, it kind of devastates Main Street and commercial corridors. So this has really changed the business situation. What's more concerning to me is how it's changed two aspects: our relationship with others and our community aspects. And I'll start with the relationship with others. We're making eye contact less and less. We're actually losing our social chops. One of the ways kids learn primarily is by watching others. One of the ways adults learn is by watching others. We see husband and wives, boyfriends and girlfriends, grandma and grandpas out in public, and we kind of model those behaviors. This is again primal kind of behavior. We imitate other people. We learn how to open doors or pull chairs out, or we learn a lot of things about being civil and being polite. Um, there are many audiences growing up that aren't going out as much. They may be doom scrolling in their bedroom. They may be binge watching. Which I get, by the way. It's not that I don't understand that, but we're losing our social chops. And that's why you're seeing outbursts on airplanes. You're seeing people who have really struggle to be civil and polite and tolerant of others and understand how to negotiate society. And so that has a major concern for me, is that we need, our average time online in front of a screen is 7 hours a day. It varies in 6 to 8, depending on the extreme. Some people are on the screen longer than that. That's 105 days a year that we're not out in the world, not out cooperating, not navigating. This is having an effect on us. It has a cognitive impairment on us. The way we remember our memories is by the places we're in. And we as human beings, our brains are literally hardwired to look for sensory stimulation. And the only way we get sensory stimulation is new. We notice, the human eye notices two things. That's movement, or change. Those two things really impact us. And when we see the same environment every day, it has an impact on us. And so now I had to work from home, which again, I understand. I do it a lot. Now we're going out less and less. So downtowns are dying, main streets are dying, and then crime takes over, graffiti takes over, and property values decrease, and then people are afraid to leave their houses. So we have this kind of vicious cycle that we need to break. And one way to really, I guess, care about it is to think about your kids. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I need to get her out. I need to get her to learn how to work with others. And she was born in the pandemic, right before the pandemic.
Mhm.
So for 3 years, she had not really gone out. She didn't understand because, again, she was, I guess, 2018 was born, so she was 2 years old right when the pandemic hit. But when we eventually went to a restaurant, she couldn't understand why the food wasn't at the table. Like when we sat down, I'm like, well, we have to order. And that boggled her mind. And then it took time. She goes, why are we waiting so long? And I'm like, well, they have to make the food. And then I took her to a wild idea because we watched all our movies at home. I took her to the movie theater, and she loved it. It was unbelievable, the experience she had at the movie theater. She dangled her feet off the edge and shushed me to be quiet and had her popcorn. And she's a shy girl. And on their way out, she was high-fiving people and dancing in the aisles. And my wife and I were like, oh, what's gotten into her? And the place got into her. The experience of being around other human beings was a primal experience that we all know. As adults, we know this, but imagine if she doesn't have that. And it's kind of dangerous for society to have all our relationships and experiences happen online.
So that's a great example of the movie theater. And I love what you said about the space getting into her. What are some other spaces like that? Where have you had experiences like that when you think about retail or communal spaces?
In my book coming out, I describe something called the bonfire effect. And the bonfire effect is a metaphor for a story I had as a kid, which was I grew up in the swamplands of South Florida, and our house was kind of on stilts. And you know, we built these elaborate buggies and vehicles to get out to this middle of the Everglades swamp kind of redneck Riviera where we'd go out and have this celebration. It took us, we had to go through a lot of work. We crawled through mud literally and barbed wire to get to this place. And at the end of the kind of day, of the weekend day, a self-organizing group of guys would get together and build a bonfire, pyramid-shaped bonfire, and we'd all gather around this bonfire and really get along incredibly well. And I was always amazed with what I call the bonfire master, the person that had to build that fire and tend to it, because if an amateur got to it, the fire would get too big and everybody'd run for the hills. There were no hills there, but run to the other lands, or they would, or if it died out, it killed the vibe. So the bonfire master is kind of like a DJ in that they got to keep it just this perfect glow and bring everybody around. And we did that every weekend for years. And later in my life, as I moved around, I saw bonfires everywhere. I saw these fascinating places that would bring people together in pro-social ways. And Carl Jung had this idea of what he called participation mystique. And that is when you're with a group of people and you just get along and you're harmonious with strangers. That's the really important part. And that's generally because you feel something bigger than yourself. You're not thinking about your own selfish needs. You're thinking about this larger idea of peace and harmony. And it's what we all ultimately want. What we don't behave that way when we're threatened. So you and I both live here in LA, and LA has bonfires everywhere, as do places all over the world. But if you look at an outdoor shopping mall like the Grove, every single day they have thousand, more people visit that than a Great Wall of China. So let's think of that. More people visit it than Disneyland. Okay, that's an unbelievable achievement. And they come to this place not because there's a Gap or Banana Republic, which are great, but you can get socks anywhere or khakis anywhere. They come there for the social payoff, the social bliss that happens of wandering around a group of people. Is it fake and is it artificial? Absolutely. Just as movies are fake, doesn't mean I still cry in a movie, which is real, or I still scream in a movie, or I get afraid, or I laugh in movies, which are all involuntary responses. This social bliss that happens at places that are able to create this bonfire effect are really powerful. And so I don't think I'm an architect, and I don't think we always know how that happens. I think because we get obsessed with the architecture, the object, not the social facilitation. And early in my career, that's when I caught myself. I wanted to be an object maker. And I really started going, is that really what I want to do? And as I started thinking about it, I was like, no, I want to bring people together in pro-social ways where they feel like they belong, they feel part of community, they feel more hospitable and generous and kind to others, and where people can grow and learn. And so that's what I'm trying to break down and decode. That's really what I spent my whole last 30 years doing. And um, you can see it at a movie theater, which is a dark black room with a collective experience. You can see it in outdoor shopping centers. You can see it in restaurants. You can see it at a Harley Davidson dealership, which we do a lot of. You can see it in a large number of places all over. There's kind of three qualities we're looking for when we go to a place. A place needs to have a solution. Like, what is it? We're a solution seeking species. So what is it that this place solves? Now, if I'm going to a warehouse to buy one of the thousands of couches they have, if they have back in the old days, they'd have the couch warehouse. That's not really a great solution. But if I'm going to a place because I want to do something recreational, I want to have leisure or fun, or I want to bond, or I just want to see other people, the more clear you can get around that solution, the better. The second thing we want is we want meaning. We want it to have some kind of idea. And so in the Harley Davidson world, it's kind of freedom and rebellion and, being a badass and sticking it to the man. These are all kind of like ideas, and people wear leather jackets and they put on a kind of attitude they want. And other places, it's not about being a badass. And some of the outdoor shopping centers, like we were mentioning, the Grove, it's about kind of this sense of harmony and the kind of miracle. And I forget the name of that movie, 34th Street, or the idea of just coming together, American life. Sometimes they're European places that we have that effect. The last thing is the experience. And when I say the experience, I really was saying solutions, meaning, and the third one is the experience of the place. And I don't mean aesthetically, although it's great aesthetically, at least not consciously aesthetically. I mean the feeling you get from a place when you feel it on your feet, when you touch it, and it's kind of symbology. And it's the subconscious reactions we have to places that really engender, that make us decide whether we want to be good to others or not. Almost 9 out of 10 times when people are being mean to each other and harsh to each other, it's in an environment that is harsh.
Mm.
We were talking about the Grove, and you'll see people just get along incredibly well inside the Grove. They go on the parking deck, they drive off the lot, and they're flipping birds at each other on the street because the environment just makes you anxious.
Traffic and concrete. Yes.
Yeah. If you go in a grocery store and you stand in line, um, we again study this for 31 years. You'll see nice people, ministers, be mean to people at checkout, and we're like, what happened there? And it's constricting people down with a giant cart, asking them to socially navigate with other people. It stresses people out, and waiting stresses people out. That doesn't mean you need to solve waiting. You need to solve experience and making people enjoy their time better.
Yeah. In the along the same lines of fostering pro-social communal environments, there's a couple of major trends that are happening right now in retail design, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, whether or not this is pro-social or really just a gimmick. One of which is that spaces are becoming, in my case, I work with a lot of furniture brands. So furniture showrooms, especially to the trade furniture showrooms, need to become coffee shops and theaters and restaurants and have all this other accoutrement, all this other stuff going on there. Is that just kind of a peacocking grab for attention, this kind of desperation, or is that really where everything needs to trend towards?
Some of it is, and some of it isn't. I worked in the furniture industry a lot. So I'm coming from Charlotte, North Carolina. We worked with all of the players up there, and we studied ad nauseum the spaces and what was happening and developed prototypes. If I could break it down into a couple of modes, one is the physical of how the human body works, the biological, and that is we have a hard time with too much information as human beings. And when we're bombarded with too much information, it wears us out. We're running off of around a 60-watt light bulb of power, literally. So, and what fuels that is calories. And so when we go to certain places, ironically, furniture stores is one of the most tiring places out of all the places. Theme parks is up there, DMV is up there, checkout at stores, but furniture stores are ranked super high on what it does to us. And it's because of all these different shapes and sizes and colors, it overwhelms us. And our brain, what it naturally tries to do, literally without us even trying, it tries to resolve everything it sees. Whatever it sees, it tries to make sense of, not our conscious brain, I should say, our subconscious senses. So our senses look out and goes, what is that thing? Do I know it? If it's something we recognize, we don't spend much time on it. But if it's changed or it's different from the object next to it, before it, near it, all of a sudden our brain goes, I need to look at that to understand what that is. If we do that over and over and over, it just drains us. And we walk out of, say, a theme park, I'll use that as an example. It just drains us, no matter how great a time we had. And so one of the things that furniture stores have a challenge with is reducing that. Most of our experiences of places are based on our memory of places. So that's what's really, we don't really think about that. But if I say theme park, you'll remember your memory of a theme park. And we oftentimes remember our worst memory of a theme park, not our best memory of a theme park. And we go, oh, no, I don't want to do that. You know, my wife oftentimes will ask me to do something and I'm dreading because I'm like, no, I've been to that. I know what that's like there. And it's not always that way, but our memory is really strong. And so what happens is in the furniture industry is asking somebody to deliberately drive out to a site across the street from the mall and enter a giant box of furniture is really hard. And now add salespeople to it. So when you add salespeople to it, all of a sudden somebody feels like they're having to deal with somebody, and they're varying degrees of salespeople. But oftentimes the mistake we see in furniture stores is they put the salespeople right up in the front as soon as you come in, which again, this is not fair, but it oftentimes triggers the car salesperson approach. And so they go, oh no, I can't do what I need to do. So we kind of break that down and try to really constrict the environment into scenes. The more we can break them up into literally kind of like a movie scene vignettes, the more we can get them in there. But then we really worry about those transition and not exhausting people as they go from one scene to the next. And of course, we don't want to put it all together because certain customers don't like that. We break those kind of customers in the category. Some want it all together, some want to be the treasure hunter. But we're trying to reduce the energy level it takes for people to go in there. We find that if we allow the customer to enter what we call the dream of someday state, and that is self-guided, when we can get a customer to go into a furniture store, not be approached by a salesperson, but really enter the ability where they can dream of what that new setting would do for their life. The more we can facilitate that, not only through our layout of the actual furniture, but through images and through other things, but no different than a movie director. I mean, a great question to ask is, if Alfred Hitchcock owned a furniture store, how would he design it? And he would have thought in terms of scenes. And scenes have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a mini climax in the middle of the scene. And that mini climax is generally based on a value he wants you to feel: love, emotion, drama, betrayal, fear. I mean, he would find that emotion in there and then make that mini climax happen in that place. But then he'd make sure that each scene connects to each scene, and he would get rid of the scenes that don't add to the story. And so we spend a lot of, I know that all sounds very complicated, but we're really trying to put that together to allow the customers to dream. We do find that we do much better with furniture stores when we group them around other activities that makes it less deliberate. That was the one accident we kept hitting upon in the 90s and then grew into the 2000s, which was if people fell into a store as opposed to deliberately went there, we would upsell a lot more.
Mm.
And that's because oftentimes, if they were near a movie theater or other place, they would go in an hour before or after and walk around, and they'd come out with a dining room table. A lot more often than we imagined. That we're like, oh, that's interesting. How we could get them in that, as opposed to asking them on a Saturday to drive out to a place. All that said, we do find that if we give them something else to do, doesn't always have to be a coffee shop, can be wine, can be other events. It does break that monotony down and gives them that moment to pause and reflect. It does help them a little bit get comfortable, but is it sometimes overused? Yes, there is a cliche look that's being overplayed.
Kevin, thank you for this. In our last couple minutes, can you plug the book? Where can we get it?
Yeah, the book is called Irreplaceable: How to Create Extraordinary Places That Bring People Together. It's 31 years experience of working in a variety of industries: furniture, cars, motorcycles, houses, all the way across the board, a lot of grocery. And it breaks down the principles of what it takes to build your own bonfires that'll convene people.
And
So
it's out now and we can get it on Amazon.
March 12th, thank you so much.
Thank you for this. Have a fabulous rest of your day.
Thank you, Courtney. I hope my answers weren't too long.
They were amazing.